Welcome to the Ambitious Dads podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Hittner. After more than 200 conversations with fathers, I realized we're just not talking enough. Not about our fears or our ambitions or how our kids are really doing or how we're holding up in the middle of all of it. This podcast is for the dads trying to build something meaningful and be present at home. The ones carrying a lot, questioning if they're doing enough, and craving honest conversations without the filters. If that's you, you're not alone. You're in the right place. Let's figure this out together. And today, my very special guest is Braxton Storm. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a therapist, and a parenting coach who grew up in California's foster care system. He was later adopted and now helps parents build calmer, more connected homes. And through his practice, Calm the Storm, and his writing at braxtonstorm.com, he blends lived experience with evidence-based tools to help families rewrite old patterns around trauma, attachment, and parenting. And of course, most importantly, he is a father to 3 about to be 4 children, with the oldest, I think, only 6 years old. So he's got a lot of lived experience to talk to us about. So welcome, Braxton. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you letting me on. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Look, you have unquestionably a really unique origin story, and I would love to ask you a little bit about it. Like, you've lived all sides of the family system, from a foster child to being an adoptee, right? And now as a therapist and parenting coach. What are some of the moments from your own childhood that most shape the way you sit with parents today when you work with them?
You know, I often think about this, ironically, when I'm sitting in front of parents. And one of the statements that kind of brings me back to, I think, as a child, what motivates me the most is when I hear parents say, you know, in relation to their children, like, I was never like that. Their child might be disruptive or whatever, and parents will say, I was never like that. I can't relate to them. And I think as a child, I often felt that the adults in my life didn't relate to me and couldn't understand what I was saying or what I was doing in the reasons why I was doing the things I was doing. And I think as a child, especially growing up in the foster care system, you feel so alone and confused and misunderstood. And so being able to now, right, sit in front of parents and be a parent myself, I make it a point to help parents understand that the best way to reach children is to be relatable, right? You're human too. And so that's kind of my take on it.
Why do you think it's so hard for parents to do that?
Unresolved trauma, right? I really think that oftentimes as parents, I mean, it's no one's fault per se, right? Like we're just not bred to, oftentimes in our family dynamics, to talk about that stuff, to heal that stuff. Unless you're, I've noticed a shift with like millennial dads. I think the research shows that millennial dads are spending 3 to 4 times more time with their children than previous generations. And I think that's due to healing, right? The access to mental health and to parenting material is abundant. And there's really a lot of options now as opposed to before.
That's a really interesting insight, right? I mean, one of the reasons I started Ambitious Dads is because there were so many fathers that I was interviewing that did want to be so much different than their fathers, and for a whole host of reasons, right? Not just for trauma, but for just identity and how they're evolving as humans, and really want like fatherhood to be front and center. But what I came across is very few of them were actually like focused on the research or focused on their insecurities. And so, there was a lot of gaps. There was gaps around their confidence, right? So they identified primarily as fathers, but then when you ask them, how confident are you in your fatherhood? Only a third would say they were confident. So this is this huge gap. Like 2/3 of dads are kind of walking around with this lack of self-confidence, this shame, right, around how they perform as fathers. What have you seen in that context? And Maybe what are some of the experiences that you've had in conversations with dads that are really low on that confidence perspective?
I think that's an interesting point to add to what you said. Um, Although I do agree that, dads in general have a wide variety of struggles, one of them being confidence. I think the one thing that we all know is that we need to be more present.
Mm.
Right. I think that is something that most dads try really hard to do, although it's difficult and is you're faced with a lot of shame, right? As you try to be messy and the dad that you want to be at the same time, it's hard to do it, right? But what I found is that working with dads, again, going back to being able to recognize, okay, like what's going on within me, right? What is this emotion that I'm feeling? Is it shame? Is it anger? Is it embarrassment? What is it? And am I able to verbalize it and connect with my child through it, right? Like, obviously, we don't want to project our stuff, but it's okay for our kids to see us be messy, right?
Yeah. Do you think the bigger challenge there is that many of the dads can't name the emotions for themselves, or they don't have experience talking them out and talking them with their kids?
Probably all of the above, right? At least in my experience. A lot of times, I just met with a dad last week, um, who it was him and his wife, and he put a lot of the responsibility on the wife, right? It was very hard for him to own his own experience and the difficulties he has connecting with his children. And I think you can go one of two ways. We either see like self-sabotaging dads who are like openly verbal about how terrible they are, or we see the other side of the spectrum, which is like, I have no insecurities, no mistakes, no issues at all, right? I'm not sure why my children are behaving or are engaged in this way. And what I try to do is swing the pendulum right in the middle and get them into a kind of the point of this podcast is vulnerability, right? Like, let's open up in a healthy way about what's going on. And one of the first steps would be naming it, right? Understanding what we're feeling.
Yeah. What about for you as a dad of 3.5, right? Almost 4 kids. What keeps you up at night in terms of fatherhood?
It's interesting as a parenting therapist and a parenting coach and a father, ChatGPT and all other internet sources have a wide. I mean, if you were to search my algorithms, there would be so much about, oh, am I doing this right? Or what's the best way to do this? Or what's the script for communicating with my child in this situation? I think that insecurity, right? Like I want to be the dad that my kids deserve, right? And I get emotional a lot talking about this, but it's just really crucial for me to be who they need me to be. And that's not easy, right? I mean, in order to do that, you have to be okay with your imperfection, right? That has to be unlocked at some point in your parenting journey in order to be the parent that you need to be, because you're never going to not be imperfect, right? That's hard for me.
Thank you for being so open with that, and I imagine because of your journey, or maybe I want to say maybe most of that exploration happened before you started your family, or did it happen actually once you had children and were like in the thick of it?
I don't know if there's anything that can prepare you for being a parent, right? Like, especially parents like where I'm at with toddlers and the 6-year-old. Like, I thought I was always good with kids, and I was always like relatable and fun and like always connection driven. That's always been me. But like doing that with your kid is a whole nother level, right? Because they know you more intimately than any other person you've ever tried to connect with. And so, yeah, I would say that my journey started well before them, but the parenting journey can only be experienced, at least in my opinion, having children, right? And like being in the thick of it.
Are there any unique ways you explore that journey in partnership with your kids? So I'll give you an example. So, my son, I was listening to a podcast, and I thought both my sons were sleeping in the back of the car because we were coming back from the beach. And I turned around and I noticed my oldest was awake, and I was like, "Oh, have you been listening to the podcast? And he goes, yeah. And I go, oh, so do you know what it's about? He said, yeah, I think it's about how to be a better dad. And I was like, yeah, that's a great, yeah, that is what it's about. Cause I wanted him to know, like, I am always trying to do that because that is really important to me. And I just wonder if there's a dialogue that you have with your kids about how you are trying to like grow in the context of your parenting.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this before the podcast, like what stage of parenting am I in currently? And I would suggest that I'm in the repair stage, right? There's a lot of repairing. And so when I say repair, what I mean is like I'm changing, I'm trying to develop, and I make lots of mistakes. And so whenever I do make a mistake with my kids, I always try, not perfectly, but I generally try to have a conversation afterward about who I am, what I'm trying to do, and what my behavior meant about our relationship. And I try to separate from them, like, this wasn't about you, right? It was about me learning to do something different. And it came off completely, inappropriate or incorrect. And so that's usually where I have these conversations with them is about mistakes and how to work through them and how I'm trying to do differently. And it has nothing to do with them.
I love that. What does it mean to say who I am when you're talking in this context of repair?
I try to separate my identity from the behavior, right? So like an example is like I raise my voice at you, but who I am is like a gentle, calm, caring, loving parent, right? And the behavior didn't align with who I am, and I'm sorry for that, right? Like that was a lapse in my judgment, and I want to do better. This is what I'm going to do better to realign with who I truly am.
I love that. It's funny. I got my kids so involved in my effort to try to be better with my tone of voice that I said, look, I'm working on this and I want you to like let me know if like I slip up. But the interesting side effect that I didn't recognize was they do it on occasion, and I'm much better with it. They do it on occasion when I don't realize I'm doing it, like I'm frustrated, I'm tired, whatever. But they do it then when they need to be, like when a boundary has been broken and I need to raise my voice. So I'll be like, you are not allowed to hit your brother like that. And they'll be like, you're not allowed to raise your voice at us. And I'll be like, this is not yet. So there's like this funny little, because kids can be, they can be so good with rules and so creative with how they get around them. So it's been an interesting side effect. I don't know if you've had anything like that happen.
Oh my gosh, yeah, all the time. I mean, very relatable to what you just said. Like whenever we do something that we've asked our kids not to do, especially my oldest, he is the intellectual, like very rule driven, and so he'll be like, "Well, you just did it to me, right? Like you're not allowed to do that either." And so it's an interest, but I think it's helpful, right? Because at the end of the day, like he's learning that we're all human and we're trying to do the best we can. And it also is like, oh shoot, like he notices, like he paid attention to what I said before.
Yeah,
and that's crucial.
on your website, you talk a lot about like core beliefs, these sort of quiet stories, like I'm always messing this up, that tend to drive how we father. If you zoom in on dads very specifically, what are the top one or two core beliefs you see that they are quietly kind of using to sabotage connection at home?
I would say that the number one for most people is in specific dads is that I'm not enough, right? I think there's a lot of pressure on dads to be something perfect, right? And if you're not perfect, then you are what the TV or media portrays you to be, right? It's like lazy, out of touch, right? Work focused, whatever. And so I think that I'm not enough core belief, although probably not formulated in parenting, probably tied to childhood, but I think that really comes out for the dads that I see.
Yes. I hear those words a lot. And those are really, I'm not enough, are like three really powerful negative words, right?
Yeah.
And how are you kind of talking through this sort of negative self-talk with these fathers to try to get them to change how they view the challenges that they face in parenting and doing it with very little time on their hands, right? 20 million priorities going on, trying to co-parent successfully and be a husband or a partner successfully, trying to parent, trying to make an income, God forbid, go to the gym, right? And have a little self-care. Like what is it that you, how do you talk to them when they come with this story of not enough?
So one of my ways of breaking the ice with dads or parents in general is, so the research shows that in order to build deep, lasting connection with your kid on a daily basis, they need 10 minutes of undivided attention. Just like no phones, no technology, not just just time with them. And so that's my first question usually is like, how much time do you spend with your kids a day? And on average, right? And most of the time it's hours. Yeah. Most of the time, like hours that we're spending with our kids, way more than previous generations. And so that's the first kind of breakthrough that I help them realize is like, whatever I'm not enough means, it doesn't correlate with what you're actually doing, right? Like just on that, like if you're looking for more connection with your kids, although you feel this way and you believe this, the facts are quite different, right? You're spending hours with your kids of undivided attention. You're showing up. A lot of dads go to therapy now, right? Like they're doing their stuff. And that belief oftentimes clouds what's factually accurate. And so helping them separate, like, yeah, you might believe this, and this is tied to something right in your past, but what's actually happening is totally different. Your kids are reaping the benefits. Like you have emotionally healthy children, right? All you got to do is look at them and interact with them for a couple seconds, and you see like, oh, they're just normal kids doing the best they can.
So sorry to interrupt. I love what you said there, because that last part is the part that at least confused me for a long time, which was, I have no idea what an emotionally healthy kid looks like. So like, yes, I feel like I'm present and I'm being supportive and doing the right things. But if my son is still, having an occasional 20-minute temper tantrum, right? Like, is he emotionally healthy? Is he not? If my two boys are fighting all the time. I remember when it's funny, when I first started interviewing dads for the Ambitious Dads work that I've done, which was over 2 years ago now, my boys were 2 and 5 at the time, and they fought all the time. And I was like, how am I failing so much as a dad that I can't like get them to stop fighting? And then I started interviewing fathers, and they were like, oh, no, like that's totally normal. My boys do the exact same thing. And so my point is, like, part of that challenge for a lot of dads is we have no idea what normal looks like in toddlerdom, in 6, 7, 8, 9, tween, teen. So how do we calm ourselves down and find and understand, like, no, this is normal? Or maybe it's easier to tell us what normal isn't. I don't know.
I think that that's a really good question. And I have a social media platform, and I just talked about this too. Like, how do we know what's normal and when to get help, right? It's never like, if we're unsure if something's normal, we should probably talk to someone, right? I mean, you can look a lot of stuff up, right? And you can listen to podcasts and things, but for your individual situation, there's no shame in going to a therapist or going to your pediatrician and saying, hey, like, this is what's going on. I'm not sure, right? Is this normal or not? But almost like, I would say, I don't know statistically, but in my experience, probably 90% of the issues are pretty normal stuff, right? Like sibling rivalry stuff, that's pretty normal. Yeah. Tantrums at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's all pretty normal. Boundary pushing, that's normal, right? But I think sometimes in our distortion as dads, we think that we're only good if our child's behavior is good, right? Like if they're kind, or if they're emotionally put together all the time, or maybe if they even don't show emotion, then that means we're doing a good job, or that means things are normal. Yeah. The truth is that messy is normal, right?
Yeah. Yes, God, and it's so funny. I had an experience with my children's grandparents where our youngest, who has now pretty much phased out of temper tantrums, but they were bad. I mean, they were long lasting, kicking. They were, the pretty deeply feeling kid type temper tantrums. And the grandparents were like, oh, there's something wrong with your child, right? Because to them, everything should just be, there should be boundaries. Everything should be calm. There should never be any issues. Whereas I think we're growing more into this idea that like messy is normal, and it's also the best and only way to really like learn about emotions in a healthy way. So I ran into that challenge trying to explain to the grandparents that like this is fine, this is safe, this is normal, but it wasn't normal for that generation, right? Because we were taught just to hide our emotions. So there's a lot of complexity, right, between generations and cultures around this topic that we need to figure out how to work through, which is quite a challenge.
100%. Yeah. I use this analogy, if you don't mind me sharing real quick. I think a lot of times in our houses, like I'm kind of like a clean freak, a little bit, not terrible, but I like to have a clean space. And my wife always says, like, I don't want a clean house with mean people. I want a lived-in house with kind people. And so
I like that.
I think that kind of addresses this generational shift. Like it used to be like, if you look good, then you must be good, right? But now it's like, we're just good inherently. And that doesn't mean we're perfect, right? Like lived in, like we're all lived in, we all have messes. We're all just trying to get together, but we can have basic tenets of like kindness and repair and, connection, those types of things.
Yeah, that I should have shown you a snapshot of the kids' playroom right now. That would have gone perfectly.
I hear you.
When let's talk a little bit about like being present, which you brought up earlier, which is very interesting. I mean, we talk about, or you talked about 10 minutes being all you really need to create connection, right? But I still feel that like for the dads that most of the people I interview with that really want to be fully engaged in the lives of their children, like that's still a low bar, to be honest, right? So what is, where should they be striving if they really want not just like, hey, I've connected today, but to really feel like they're creating like meaningful impact on a daily basis with their children?
So I think that's unique to each family dynamic. But one thing that I suggest is like wherever you are, be 100% there, right? So like if you're in dad mode and you're home from work, like be in dad mode, right? Like let's just be with our kids. And oftentimes that's, like 2, 3, 4 hours a night, baseball games or sports or whatever else you're doing, right? But when you're at work, you're 100% at work, right? Like be whoever you are. You can't balance everything, right? This idea of balance, I think it's distorted. And we think like, oh, we should, make a lot of money and we should be the perfect dad and be the perfect husband and have the clean house and whatever else. It's garbage, right? Like that's never going to be achievable. But just be 100% where you are.
That's great advice. And how about co-parenting, which is another incredibly challenging topic? How do you approach that with some of your clients? How do you approach that in your own life, right? I imagine to have 3 kids under the age of 6, it's got to be pretty stressful. So yeah, how do you how do you manage co-parenting from a couple of perspectives? One, just your overall relationship with your partner, but 2, when you guys have different points of view on how to parent, on the implication of different parenting decisions, that sort of thing. How have you guys managed that?
Yeah, I would say that we're far from perfect in that arena, but I do think that the basic tenets of how we want to parent are understood by both of us, and they're both things that look different when we engage in them. Like my wife, her repair process with the kids looks different than my repair process, or when she's trying to redirect behavior, it looks different than how I might do it, or her connection looks different than mine. But we all, like us both, we behave under the same tenets, right? And we believe in the same tenets of parenting. And so one of the first questions that I ask parents is like, have you ever talked about how you want to parent? And I just had a couple of this last week. They were like, no, like we just kind of thought that we would just parent how our parents parented. And so I invite parents to have conversations. Like it's okay. Even if you have teenagers and you've never talked about it before, it's okay to talk. Like, do we want to keep doing it this way or do we want to shift it up? Right. I think that the conversation is really crucial between spouses. Like, how do we want to do this?
How does that, what are the main sort of big questions that bubble up in that conversation?
One is like, how do we want to discipline, right? And there's a difference between discipline and punishment. And so understanding the difference and like, how do we want to discipline? Number two, like, how do we want to address these particular issues? Like triangulation, right? Kids always go to dad and then they go to mom, like, oh, well, like, how do we want to address those things? Like kids' behavior. How do we want to address repairing? Like, do we say sorry? How do we say sorry? How do we address our own stuff, right? Probably the most important one is like, are we willing to work on ourselves, right? Like, are we both? I have sometimes, and I think this is just kind of how it is, but oftentimes moms will be the ones that bring their kids to me. And they'll call me and they'll say, okay, like, when do I bring my kid? And I'll be like, okay, do you have a spouse? Okay, yes, you two come to the session first. I need to see you and your husband or your new spouse. And you need to be held accountable, right? Like, if something's going to change, you got to do it.
I love that. And in those situations, if the parents are divorced, separated, you still, I imagine, invite them both in there. And is there a different way you handle that process, or it's the same?
It's pretty much the same. I have several co-parenting couples that like they've divorced or separated, and I'll bring them if they're comfortable and amicable. I'll bring them both into the session. The way I structure it is like I meet with the parents first for a couple minutes, and then I'll meet with the child, and then I'll meet with all of them together at the end. And the parents always are invited in. Sometimes they're not willing to, but I'll talk to them separately.
I love that, and it goes to, I think you also write a lot about our own emotional regulation as adults, as parents, and recognizing when we're triggered and how to sort of regulate ourselves before we address maybe the issue that's in front of us with our kids. Is there a process that you teach in particular about kind of identifying our trigger and then like how we regulate ourselves that you do with patients and clients?
So the interesting thing is it takes 90 seconds to experience a full range of emotion, right? And to de-escalate emotion. So 90 seconds in general. If
You're talking about our own emotion.
Yeah, not someone else's, but our own emotion. So if we're able to do something separate from engage aggressively with our child, like if we're able to like go on a walk or, go touch something cold or do something, right, to experience our emotion in a safe way. It takes 90 seconds. It really doesn't take a lot of time. Now, there's obviously outliers, but for the most part, like if we can just separate ourselves and do something that helps us to regulate, whether that's tapping or walking around or exercise or drinking a cold glass of water, or as my wife does this, she yells in pillows, right? She'll go in a room, shut the door, and just yell in a pillow. And those things help, right? Like anything we can do that's safe, that doesn't do harm to ourselves or others or to anything that we have. It's all a game, right? Like anything we can do to experience it.
I love that. And following up on that, it was interesting because this past weekend I was riding bikes with my boys, and one of them swerved in towards the other one. So it was like a safety issue. And again, so I raised my voice. I was like, we are stopping right now. I was probably even more pissed than this. We are stopping right now. That is absolutely out of bounds. And then they proceeded to, basically try to say that they weren't running into each other and that I raised my voice. And so I was getting more upset. And I guess I sort of naturally did what you said. I was like, I just stopped talking to them. I got off my bike and I sat down on a bench. And like they were trying to engage with me, and I just kind of did my best to ignore it until I calmed down. My question is like, what are they experiencing when they see dad just sort of like disappear for 90 seconds or 2 minutes, or in that case, they were just sort of, they tried to engage with me. I didn't engage back. So they started just engaging with themselves until I was ready to get up and continue. But is that okay? Like, what are they experiencing when they see that?
So I like that question. Maybe another question to that would be, what are they not experiencing, right? They're not experiencing fear. They're not experiencing rejection. They're not experiencing heightened, unregulated emotion, right? They might be confused. And so I would add to what you did, like expressing just a simple sentence like, "Dad needs to calm down for a second,"
Hmm.
right? Or "Dad's going to regulate himself. Just give me 5 minutes," right? But I think oftentimes, again, getting into the mind of dads, we're like, "Oh, shoot, like, is this wrong?" Right? Are we doing it wrong? No. If there's a different way to approach it, it might be like, what are they not experiencing, right?
God, that's great for all the mindset stuff we've talked about of the I'm not enough, right? And highlighting that when we actually look at the time we are giving our kids and the health that our kids are in and yeah, this is great. Thinking about what they're not experiencing as much as what they are helps us feel more confident as fathers. I really love that advice. Um,
Yeah.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit more in terms of like how your story has really kind of blossomed into, I mean, now you have a big family and it's getting even bigger. And like this, you must have told, there must have been a lot of difficult stories that you told yourself about yourself as both a child and now as a parent. And how has that sort of evolved in how you parent your kids and your experience with them? And I imagine just by how we've engaged with one another, you are close to your emotions and as with me, like I, you know, when there's an opportunity to feel touched by like the experience I have with my kids, I may cry, I may give them a big hug, and vice versa. Like, how has that played out for you over the course of your life?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's so funny because I was talking to a colleague and they were saying the same thing. Like, man, you're just like very close to your emotions. And I think that sometimes as dads is very uncomfortable, especially for those dads who are not, right? Not saying that this is the best way to be, but emotion is okay. And so my kids frequently see me cry. Not always bad, right? Not always like I'm sad, but like this is just like a really joyful moment, or this is a really cool thing, or sometimes I even like I'll just sit and feel when I hear my kid do something that I've taught them, or when I engage with them and they listen, right? Like those things really matter to me, and they're really important to me as a dad. And so allowing ourselves to be appreciative of the process, right? It's not it's not always like that, right? There's a lot of times that my kids do not do what I wish they would, or probably even the majority of the time. Uh, but one thing my wife reminds me a lot is that there was a time that I prayed or hoped for the experience I'm currently living, right? Whether that was as a kid in foster care, like, man, I really just want parents who are connected, right? Or I really just want to feel seen. I'm not the child anymore, but my kids are, and they're living quite a different experience than I ever did. And it might not be perfect, right? And that's again, like that's hard for us as dads, but it's okay, right? Like it's 1,000, and maybe this isn't even healthy to say, but it's like 1,000 times better, right? It's okay, right? The mess is okay. Your enoughness is enough, right? Your imperfection is okay. I think those are all things that have helped me again imperfectly recognize that this is just part of the process.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I had similar experience this weekend. So I just graduated these 17 leaders from a year-long kind of personal and professional development program I do with one of my clients, and one of them wrote me this beautiful note, and I decided I wanted to read it to my son, and he saw me tearing up as I was reading it, and he just took his hand and put it on my hand, and I was just like, oh my God. I mean, that was perfection for me, right? It was like he has this ability to recognize how to engage emotionally. That was it was like the I'm going to carry that for months. It was the proudest moment, and literally all it was like seeing that he understood my emotion, and one was okay with my emotion, which was tears, and two kids just know how to deal with that in such a beautiful way sometimes, right?
Oh my gosh.
We have to relearn how to do it well, but like, what's more natural than just putting your hand on someone when they're feeling a beautiful emotion? So
100%.
yeah, it was beautiful. I just wanted to share that. And then the other thing that your response brought up was about this idea of messy. So messy is beautiful. The challenge with messy is we don't live in a culture where messy fits in very well when our days are structured to the tooth, right? Like we've got, you know, we barely make it to the bus stop on time, which is by far the most stressful part of my day, right? You get to the bus stop on time, then you squeeze in your work day, your calls, your meetings, or your kids aren't even at school yet, right? And then you've just got situation after situation, meeting after meeting, appointments, sick kids, all this stuff. And then it's like, oh, on top of that, let's live a messy life, right? So, which we can say is a beautiful and logical thing to do, but then practically speaking, it can be overwhelming. So, how do we balance the overwhelmingness that comes with messy versus the importance of living that to some extent?
So I think that that's an important distinction, right? When we talk about messy, or when I talk about messy, I'm suggesting that the imperfection of human, right, is messy, and that's okay. But in terms of like helping our kids to thrive, they need a couple of things, like basic tenets that are critical. One of them being structure, right? Kids do need structure. Not all of it needs to be scheduled to the tooth, like you suggested, but our society, like you said, kind of facilitates this. Structure is important. Kids need to know what to predict, right? Whether it's from us or from their environment, the schedule, right? Those types of things. But there might be times, there was a time last week or the week before that so we had a rough morning, and my son, we take him to school, and I knew in the back of my mind, like, I should probably just park on the side of the road and talk what went down with him, right? But I was like, no, like he needs to just go to school, right? Like he can't be late, etc. It stresses him out, whatever. So I dropped him off at school, and then I parked, and I was like, dang it, like I missed a really critical, messy part, right? Like it wouldn't have gone perfect, right? He wouldn't have been at school on time, but I would have had that opportunity to connect with him. And those are the points that I think it's more important to be unstructured, messy, whatever you want to call it, because it leads to more connection with your kids, right?
So in that sense, what I hear you saying is lean into if you have kind of a decision between staying in the structured part of the day versus a unique opportunity to connect and or teach, right? Or, have some important lesson, lean towards the teach, the lesson, the messiness story, right?
You're always going to regret the structure if you don't take advantage of the connection.
I love that. I love that. Fantastic. What else should I have asked you around fatherhood, around you've got again 3 kids and another on the way. What else is like really challenging for you right now on a day-to-day basis with such young kids?
Man, right now, what's most challenging is getting my 2-year-old not to touch the Christmas tree. That is a challenge, right? Thinking of all the ornaments.
Oh yeah, the ornaments are only from the middle of the tree up, right?
Goodness gracious, yeah, that's the most recent challenge. But you know what? Parenting is rough. Like it's not. I always tell parents, like, you don't go into parenting to get validation, right? You're not going to get it from your kids often, and so that means that you have to heal, right? Like you got to get that validation from yourself, and that requires a lot of emotional vulnerability and work. And it's never too late to do that, right? Like there's so many resources out there to heal and to become, not even maybe to become, but to unlock who you truly are as a parent and who you've always wanted to be. Like you are that person. You just have to unlock it, right? You have to allow yourself to be it. And I've seen that time and time again with parents. So that's my advice to all parents is like, just take advantage of the time you have, right? Like you might regret not doing it, but you'll never regret doing it.
I love it. I love it. And on the theme of messy too, I always like to end each of my podcasts with a messy story. So, a story of an exploding diaper or some projectile vomit. So what's you have such young kids. What's your favorite crazy messy story that you have from your life so far?
Oh, goodness. So one of the things that always happens on road trips and with the holidays, it's inevitable. But this last road trip we took, I was speaking at a conference and my family came with me this time. And on the way back, we were driving back home to Vegas. And my son was so quiet, and he's not quiet. He was so quiet. I look back and I'm like, hey, gosh, like he looks maybe like he's sick. And then all of a sudden I look back again and his cheeks are full. And the next step was he just projectiled all over the car. And we're like an hour into like a 9-hour trip.
Oh.
So he threw up a good, 4 or 5 more times. And it's like 12 o'clock at night. And we're like at a gas station trying to wipe down stuff and clean stuff. And, it's just part of the experience. But geez, like that's real hard for me.
Oh, that's a great one. So basically your nose went numb for the next 8 hours.
Stuck it into my shirt the whole ride.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate everything, your vulnerability, your stories. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate being on here.